Hey guys, today we're taking a look at the best power paddle on the market right now, the Spartus Olympus. For the dimensions, the Olympus is a curved hybrid paddle that's 16.35 by 7.65 with a 14mm core and a 5.5-inch handle. The swing weight is 113 and the twist weight is 6.3, both of which are slightly under average for those measurements across all the paddles I've tested, but they are also roughly in line with most hybrid 14mm core paddles, which makes sense. The Olympus is made with the same hot mold thermoforming process that many Gen 2 paddles on the market use, like the Carbon 1X and the 6-0 Double Black Diamond, so it shares similar features like a durable unibody design, an expanded sweet spot from the edge foam in the perimeter, and a stronger and stiffer paddle feel. However, the Olympus does have two differences that separate it from other thermoform paddles on the market. For starters, they use something different in the core material they call the Ascension core. They can't release too much information on it yet, but what they've mentioned so far is that they use a polymer to fill up the core cells to provide more feel. It's a much more intensive process where as of right now, a worker can only produce 4 paddles per day. As for the other difference, they implement fiberglass in with the carbon fiber surface, which is something some other paddles have done as well, but still, it's something that isn't too common in the market. So with these changes, how does the Olympus actually play? While the majority of thermoform paddles fall in the range of the all-court category, the Olympus is going to be up there as a power paddle. So for reference, while a 6-0 Double Black Diamond is something I consider in that middle all-court range, the power paddle category is where I would place the Yola Mod TA15s, Gearbox Pro Powers, and the new Paddle-Tech power paddles. For the power of the Olympus, I would actually place it closer to the bottom range of these paddles. While it's noticeably more than the standard Gen 2s like the Carbon 1X series, it doesn't reach the power levels of the previously mentioned ones. The power is more similar to the Paddle-Techs, but just a tad bit underneath. So it's something I still classify as a power paddle, as you can noticeably get more force compared to any other Gen 2 on the market. The one thing to note is that the paddle does have a bit of a break-in period. When I first received the paddle, it didn't feel any more powerful than a Gen 2, but after a few days of play, I noticed it to start get hotter. Now power is what I can get from a full swing of the paddle. With pop, I'm going to measure how fast the ball comes off the paddle face with limited to no movement. For this measurement, the Olympus is also less than all the other paddles, but also less than non-Gen 3 style paddles like the 13mm Engage Pursuit Pro MX. I do see it as up there in terms of pop compared to 14mm Gen 2s, likely because of the fiberglass layer it has, but compared to all the other Gen 3 style paddles and even some thinner 13mm cores, the pop of the Olympus sits at the bottom. In terms of the overall firepower of the Olympus, it's a paddle that exponentially gets more force with the more you swing. It's not going to have the most power, but it's noticeably more than the majority of the market, and is still going to be up there competing against Gen 3 style paddles. With all that being said, why do I consider this my favorite paddle and one of the best power paddles if it doesn't even have the most power or pop? For starters, what I enjoy the most about the Olympus is how it feels compared to the others. I think the polymer foam injected in each cell gives the paddle more of a solid feel on impact. While the Yola Mod feels a bit hollow and stiff on impact, with the Olympus, that solid feel it has lets me control the ball a bit more, especially in my soft game, which was an issue I struggled with on the Yola Mods and gearboxes. Shots just feel more predictable with the Olympus, even after the break-in period. Although you do get more power after the break-in period, the pop doesn't shoot up with it, and is a Gen 3 style paddle that has controllable power. You get power when you need it on putaways and drives, but it's not a difficult to control paddle during the soft game either. That extra foam in the core also helps with the sweet spot. 14mm cores are known to be less forgiving with lower twist weights and sweet spots, and while the Olympus does have a lower twist weight measurement that reflects the 14mm core, it does have a better sweet spot than every 14mm paddle I've hit with. It's not quite at the level of a 16mm, but I think it's noticeably better than the Paddle-Techs and gearboxes. That said, the Olympus is still a paddle I recommend adding lead tape to. I ended up adding 0.2 ounces of Pickleball Effects tungsten tape, starting at both the 8 o'clock and 4 o'clock positions and down to the throat, which I found necessary to bump up the paddle stability. With a good lead tape setup, I find the Olympus to be the most forgiving and controllable power paddle on the market. I think if you are interested in hopping onto the Gen 3 paddle trend, the Olympus is a solid option to consider, because the power it offers is controllable, and it isn't a drastic change in performance when compared to other Gen 3 style paddles, and the spin, like the Spartus Apollo, is top tier. In short, I would describe the Olympus as being most similar to the new Paddletech paddles, but with a bit less firepower and more sweet spot and stability. So one last thing I did want to talk about is the durability of this construction process. Another paddle company that also did foam injected in each cell core was Cortec, and they had issues with foam leaking out of the core and compromising the core's integrity, which led to high amounts of power but ultimately made the paddle illegal where it would fail a deflection test. With the Olympus, the foam used isn't an EVA foam but a polymer one, and foam isn't fully filled into each cell, but it is instead only partially filled. So with this construction, they guarantee that there's no chance of the core breaking like it did with Cortec. Also, paddles like the Gen 3 Yolas have issues where the core breaks down and causes the paddle to become too hot and uncontrollable. Spartus claims that we won't need to worry about these issues, and for me, having used the Olympus pretty heavily for over a month, while I did notice the paddle getting more powerful, it wasn't to the point where it felt uncontrollable to me. Now, I don't have tools to test if the Olympus would fail a deflection test now, and I can't 100% confirm that the core hasn't broken down, but as of my opinion right now with the time I've spent with the paddle, so far I don't think there are any durability issues. Now, I mentioned before that this is an intensive process to make, and because of that, this is a paddle that I don't anticipate staying in stock for very long periods of time. Many of their pre-sales and pre-orders I've witnessed have gone by very quickly, and for its official release, I also think this paddle will sell out fast and have a hard time staying in stock. But like I said, this is a power paddle, and if that's not something you're interested in and want more all-court or control with more forgiveness, I'd recommend checking out the Apollo instead. But if you are curious about trying a power paddle or want to use one that I think is easier to control than other paddle options on the market, then I highly recommend acting quick on picking one of these up. I've added my discount code here and in the video description below if you do want to pick one up.